President Trump is set to reveal his tax reform plan today, set to slash the corporate and small business tax rate down to 15%. This is an original plan that the White House put together. It's not coming from Congress. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin speaking today, not on the specifics, but on their efforts to work together with Congress. He's calling this the largest tax reform plan in U.S. history. Joining me now, Chairman of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Tax Policy, Congressman Peter Roskam. Thank you for your time today, Congressman.
Delighted. Thank you.
Okay, spell that out for us, because this plan is originating from the White House, not legislatively on the Hill. What do you make? How's it working?
Look, I make this as a good thing. In other words, we need White House leadership on this. The House has a plan. We absolutely need the White House to be fully engaged in this process, and for them to take the initiative and say, these are the principles and these are the things that we're driving for. This is a good day. We need to learn more as it's rolled out, but I think them taking the initiative is welcome news indeed.
Well, a lot of the conversation has centered around whether these will be short-term, larger cuts or smaller cuts that last in the long term. A lot of people have argued that businesses and investors need that stability in the long term, and so they would go more along with something that would work in the long term versus if you get something that's too much of an impact on the deficit, you know it won't work through reconciliation. It changes your vote totals. Where do you stand on those two options?
I think the preference without question is to have a permanent policy, and that is to the point that you just made. That is, investors need to be saying what's going to be happening not 10 years, not 2 years from now, but 20 years from now. And one of the things that we have wrong in this country is essentially we have temporary tax policy and permanent spending policy. We need to flip that. We need permanent tax policy. The way you get permanent tax policy is if it's paid for. I come from the state of Illinois, and my home state is an example of what not to do in terms of how to approach debt and deficits and the impact it has when those things are ignored. So we're now $20 trillion in debt, and I think we've got an opportunity to have a transformational moment, flip a tax code, update it that hasn't been updated in 30 years, and let's do it on a permanent basis instead of doing it in a way where this whole thing is going to expire in 10 years. Let's pursue permanence.
Okay, but if you do something that does involve the reconciliation process, obviously you need almost no Democrats to go along with you on this. I want to read something that Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat out of Oregon, said. If you do this in a partisan way, he says, you make it partisan only and you don't get both sides invested in it. People saw what a debacle you had on the first round of health policy. You can win by reconciliation if you just decide to hardball your way through it, but the track record shows it's not sustainable and it's not successful. Would you like to get Democrats on board with you on tax reform?
Of course. Yeah, we would love to get Democrats on board. What we've got to agree on is a growth agenda. That is, some Democrats are of the worldview that the economy is a fixed pie, and they want to argue, well, if somebody gets a bigger slice, then somebody else gets a smaller. What we need is a common ground that says, no, the economy is not a fixed pie. It can grow, and we need to create more growth and let more people actively participate. I mean, the criticism of using reconciliation is ironic in that that's exactly what the Democrats did with creating the Affordable Health Care Act, or the Affordable Care Act, which is now underwhelming. So let's learn from that lesson, actually, and move forward. But my argument goes back to, let's make this a permanent plan. Let's have permanent tax changes to update this code in ways that can really be transformational, and not just having a discussion a few years from now that says, well, it's going to be expiring.
So are we talking about reforming the tax code, or are we talking about passing some specific tax cuts, a much easier lift?
So that's just it. The House Republican blueprint is about reforming the tax code, actually updating it in such a way that we haven't seen in a generation. There are some voices that say, hey, don't worry about that. Don't worry about fundamental reforms. You can keep basically the same tax structure and simply reduce rates. I think that that is not as desirable as moving towards ultimate reform.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be watching for the rollout later today. I know a lot of hard work by you and others over at the White House. Congressman Roskam, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Shannon.
So 21 passed. There's new push.